Every Star Trek Discovery changed from its original vision its series creator just revealed. Star Trek Discovery's series creator, Brian Fuller, reveals how different his original vision was from the series that eventually happened. In early 2016, Fuller was named as the executive producer of the first Star Trek TV series since Star Trek Enterprise was canceled in 2005. Discovery was also the first Star Trek series made for streaming as one of the flagship shows for CBS All Access before it was rebranded into Paramount+. However, by the end of 2016, Brian Fuller left Star Trek Discovery due to creative differences. Gretchen J. Berg and Aaron Harberts took over as Star Trek Discovery Season 1 showrunners, although they were also replaced at the end of the season, with Alex Kurtzman and his secret hideout production company executive producing all Star Trek projects on Paramount+. Controversial since its inception, Star Trek Discovery proved to be a success, running for 5 seasons and spawning multiple Star Trek on Paramount+ series and even a Star Trek streaming movie. Brian Fuller was a guest on the Decon Chamber podcast hosted by Star Trek Enterprise's Connor Trenier and Dominic Keating. In a wide-ranging discussion about his celebrated writing career as a writer on Star Trek, Deep Space Nine and Star Trek Voyager, as well as creating the hit TV series Pushing Days and Hannibal, Fuller dropped some bombshells about his original vision for Star Trek Discovery. Initially planned as an anthology series with Season 1 telling a self-contained story, Star Trek Discovery radically evolved in multiple ways. Brian Fuller told the Decon Chamber that he cast Michelle Yeoh as Captain Philippa Georgiou in Star Trek Discovery. Yeoh went on to play the Mirror Universe's Emperor Georgiou, but CBS Studios resisted his choice of Sonequa Martin Green as Michael Burnham, Star Trek Discovery's series lead. I was fighting for Sonequa. They didn't want to wait for Sonequa, and I was like, push the production. She's great. Martin Green would eventually be cast as Michael Burnham, who was originally a disgraced former first officer fighting for redemption. By Star Trek Discovery Season 5's ending, Burnham was captain of the USS Discovery and an intergalactic hero who saved the United Federation of Planets in 2 different centuries. Martin Green is also a powerhouse actor who was one of Star Trek Discovery's greatest assets as series lead and producer. Anthony Rapp was cast as an Andorian doctor instead of Lt. Paul Stamets. Anthony Rapp played Lieutenant Paul Stamets in Star Trek Discovery Season 1, but Brian Fuller revealed to the Decon Chamber that Rapp was originally cast as an Andorian doctor. Andorians are blue-skinned aliens known for their antennae. In Star Trek Discovery, Stamets was an astromycologist and one of the creators of the USS Discovery's displacement-activated Spore Hub drive. Star Trek Strange New Worlds would eventually create an Andorian chief engineer, Lieutenant Hemmer Bruce Horrick, who was a blind Ener, a subspecies of the Andorians. Perhaps the most famous Andorian character was Shran, played by Jeffrey Combs in Star Trek Enterprise. Wilson Cruz was originally going to play Lt. Paul Stamets. Wilson Cruz played Dr. Hugh Culber on Star Trek Discovery, but according to Brian Fuller, Cruz auditioned to play Lt. Paul Stamets. Culber and Stamets would eventually become the first gay married couple in Star Trek. Culber was also one of the most vital Star Trek Discovery characters as the USS Discovery's physician and ship's counselor. When Cruz initially expressed interest in Star Trek, Fuller told Wilson he would look awesome in a Starfleet uniform. When Star Trek Discovery premiered in 2017, it was billed as both a love letter to John Roddenberry's optimistic vision and a bold reimagining of Trek for modern audiences. Yet as the series wraps its 5th and final season in 2025, co-creator Brian Fuller has finally opened up about how far Discovery drifted from his original blueprint and how different the show could have been had his vision remained intact. Here's a breakdown of every significant change Fuller just revealed, offering a glimpse into the Discovery that might have been. 1. A true Star Trek anthology series. Fuller originally pitched Discovery not as a single narrative following a fixed crew, but as an anthology series. Each season would leap to a different era of Star Trek history, exploring entirely new characters, ships, and philosophical questions. The first season would have covered the events leading up to the original Star Trek series TOS, while later seasons could have tackled the Romulan War, the foundation of the Federation, or even glimpses of the far future. CBS, Fuller says, balked at the risky format. They wanted consistent characters that could build an enduring fan base, not a series of disconnected stories. The anthology idea was scrapped early, setting Discovery on the serialized path fans know today. 2. Michael Burnham wasn't supposed to be the lead. According to Fuller, his original plan did not center on Michael Burnham as the main character. Instead, the ensemble was meant to be more balanced, with the captain, initially Captain Georgiou, holding primary narrative weight. Burnham was conceived as an important character, but not the clear protagonist whose arc would dominate every season. Network executives, inspired by the success of character-driven prestige TV, pushed for a singular central character with a deep, serialized backstory. Burnham emerged from those discussions, and Sonequa Martin Green's powerful performance helped cement her as the face of the series. 3. A stark, retro-futurist visual aesthetic. One of the earliest changes Fuller regrets losing is his distinct vision for Discovery's visual style. He wanted the series to evoke the sharp lines, primary colors, and minimalist futurism of TOS, albeit with a modern polish. Fuller describes concept art of bold red doors, clean white corridors, and uniforms that subtly paid homage to 1960s designs. By the time Fuller exited the project, the production had pivoted to a darker, sleeker, and grittier aesthetic, closer to the Abrams-verse films and later Trek series like Picard. Fuller laments that his nostalgic, retro-futurist homage was lost, replaced by a moodier, more militaristic Starfleet. 4. Klingons with depth and nuance in hair. Perhaps the most polarizing change Fuller discussed was the depiction of Klingons. His original treatment envisioned the Klingons as a fractured, complex society with political intrigue and competing factions, not simply monolithic aggressors. He also wanted to preserve the familiar Klingon look, including the long hair and warrior aesthetic seen in The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. When Fuller departed, the creative team radically redesigned the Klingons, giving them bald, ornate-headed appearances and emphasizing their alienness. The early focus on the religious zealotry of T'Kuvma's house was only part of Fuller's larger tapestry, which never materialized. Fans were deeply divided on this reinterpretation, and later seasons slowly reverted the Klingons toward a more traditional look. 5. More philosophical, less action-driven storytelling. Fuller emphasized that his vision leaned heavily into Star Trek's core of philosophical inquiry and moral dilemmas. While he appreciated the need for dramatic stakes, he hoped to avoid the heavy emphasis on warfare, space battles, and universe-ending threats that defined much of Discovery's early seasons. He wanted episodes that echoed classics like The Measure of a Man or The City on the Edge of Forever, intimate, cerebral tales where ethics and diplomacy carried as much tension as phaser fire. As CBS pushed for higher stakes and faster pacing to compete with genre contemporaries like Game of Thrones, Fuller's more contemplative approach faded. 6. LGBTQ+ representation even further ahead of its time. While Discovery broke ground with the franchise's first openly gay couple, Stamets and Culber, Fuller notes he had even broader plans for LGBTQ+ representation from the start. His pitch included a non-binary main character, a transgender character with a prominent leadership role, and more casual normalization of queer relationships across Starfleet. Though later seasons of Discovery did introduce characters like Adira and Gray, Fuller suggests those developments would have been core from